I'm so fortunate that so many of you know that you can reach out to me with questions, and I am constantly answering questions. Some of them are pretty common, and I figure that if so many people are asking, then there are so many more that are wondering but not asking. So today, let's go through them. When we make an offer, will we get a chance to change our bid? When we're looking for a house and we find one that you want to make an offer on, there's usually a price that you'd love to pay, a higher price that you'd pay if you had to, and an even higher price that you aren't willing to pay. So when it comes time to strategize how we approach the seller with an offer, I'm often asked, if we aren't the highest bid, will we have a chance to adjust our bid? Or will we get a counteroffer? Valid questions, and the short answer is maybe. A seller can do as they choose, and if you think of a scenario, I've seen it. We make a bid, and the seller just straight up tells us no. We bid under the asking price, and the seller comes back to say they won't take less than asking price, or they try to meet us in the middle, or they just straight up accept it. We find something we really love, we bid $100,000 over asking price with an appraisal guarantee and no conditions, and we just get a call that says, sorry, we went with another offer. No context, no counteroffer, no nothing. We find a house that we know is going to be extremely competitive, but we really want it, so we throw everything we have at it. Submit the offer, wait a bit, and then we get a call. Hi, we've received 20 offers. The 3 offers the sellers are most seriously considering are all very close in price and term, and you're one of them. We're giving all 3 the opportunity to change anything about their bid if they would like. That one is an emotional roller coaster. When we're making a bid, what strategy we choose has a lot to do with other factors surrounding the house. How long has it been on the market? How much interest do they have? How close to reality is their asking price, high or low? Have they established an offer deadline? Do we trust that they're being honest with us? Is this a we'll buy it for the right price house, or is it a we absolutely have to have it house? This is a good time to remind you that having your own real estate agent to represent you from the moment you decide you want to buy a house all the way until after it closes is so important. A good agent will be able to help you navigate all these factors, shine an unbiased light on the house itself and what a good deal looks like, and ultimately make the transaction as smooth as possible because we're just scratching the surface here. But my best general advice for you is if you really want the place and there's a reason to believe it can or will be competitive, don't expect a counteroffer. If you lose and you know you would have paid more, that sucks. If you win, but then you say to yourself, holy shit, what did I just do? That also sucks. Getting the right house for the right price with the best terms possible is awesome, and I'd love to help you do that. How do we look for a good deal when the market's so red hot? For starters, the market's changing nationally in a big way and locally here in Western New York in a small way. Some areas are still bonkers. You want a house in Kenmore? We're going to war. Others, not so much. You want a house in Lancaster? As of shooting this video, almost a third of the available houses in Lancaster have done price drops. And now it's time for my favorite saying, every situation is different. Sometimes stellar negotiation gets a deal. Sometimes stellar negotiation is met with stubbornness and we get nowhere. Sometimes the seller just has to move fast and they'll take the first halfway decent offer that comes in. And I probably don't have to tell you that the longer the house is on the market, the more likely it is that they're negotiable. Here's the insider trick. I love finding a listing with terrible photos. All the time, I hear about how photos make a house look so much better than it is, but what I never hear about is the photos being bad. And do you know why? It's because people are so quick to write off a house that looks bad in the photos, they so rarely go look at it for real. Here's a situation I've come across many, many times. The buyer sends me a list of houses they want to see. One of them they don't love, but they love the area, and we might as well check it out while we're out and about. We get there and find that the house is so much better than we thought it was gonna be. And because so many people wrote it off before they even saw it, there's very little competition. And that's the one they end up buying. It amazes me how many $1 million+ listings I see where the photos are clearly taken on a cell phone, often with a finger in front of the lens, or a reflection of the person taking the photos in the mirror, or terrible lighting, or crooked angles, or, my personal favorite, a good chunk of the 50 photos we're allowed being close-up shots of some useless decoration that isn't even part of the house. I'm in some awesome group chats with some awesome real estate agents, and we love sharing bad photos on high-dollar listings just for a good laugh. Here's the thing. I sell good houses, bad houses, cheap houses, and expensive houses. Every single one of them gets photographed by professionals. They're edited, but not in such a way that the house under-delivers when a potential buyer walks through the door. It's a tricky balance, but it's well thought out and vetted. It's one of the many reasons you should hire me to sell your house, but if you don't, make damn sure that you know how the agent you do hire is going to be handling the photos. How long does it take between deciding I want to buy a house and actually moving in? How long it takes to find a house is different for absolutely everybody. I have people that come to me already pre-approved with a list of 12 houses that we're going to go see over the course of 3 days, and they're going to be buying one of those. Others are looking for something very specific. We see a house a month or less, and we pounce when the exact right situation hits. And sometimes that takes a long time. I've had people buy the first house that we see. Usually we go look at a couple more before we make that offer to make sure this is really the one. Sometimes people don't call me until the exact right house hits, and we go full steam ahead just at that one. The short answer is, plan on it taking at least 3 months. Odds are we're going to spend at least a month looking, and if you're getting a mortgage, it usually takes about 2 months between accepted offer and closing, so there is no usual amount of time. I'm often asked, how much is the down payment on a house, and how much are closing costs? I've had people close for less than $1,000 total, and I've had people put over 50% down on their mortgage. You name it, I've seen it. Here's a nightmare scenario for you, whether you're buying or selling a house. Buyer goes to the bank and says, I have $25,000 for a down payment. How much house can I afford? And the bank says, great, we trust you, and we can get you qualified for a $300,000 mortgage. Happy day. We go looking for houses, find the one you love, make an offer, get it accepted, and then you go apply for the mortgage. The bank says, congrats. Looks like your total cash to close will be $37,000. And you say, but I told you I only have $25,000 down. And the bank says, and odds are the deal's gonna fall apart. As a buyer, you were honest with the bank and they told you what they told you. As a seller, you saw the pre-qualification letter and wouldn't have any reason to believe it was inaccurate. So what happened there? What happened is the bank heard $25,000 down and failed to mention that there will be costs outside of just the down payment. The thing is, when you buy a house, there is no fixed cost. My favorite example is when you buy a house with a mortgage, you pay your first full year of property taxes up front. Meaning, if you're deciding between a house with $4,000 a year in property taxes and a house with $6,000 a year in property taxes, buying the latter automatically means you're going to bring $2,000 more to the closing table, regardless of price or terms. But a good rule of thumb is, if you're doing a 5% down mortgage, have 10 to 12% of the purchase price in cash on hand to spend. The phrase you care most about is called total cash to close, which is going to include everything. Down payment, closing costs, prepaids, fees, etc., etc. And a good loan officer at a good bank is going to walk you through all of that. The bad news is there are plenty of banks and underqualified loan officers out there that can very much put you in this spot. Having a local, reputable lender that verifies everything you tell them can issue a pre-approval instead of a pre-qualification. That puts you at less risk for heartbreak and makes it easier for a seller to accept your offer because they know everything's been verified. And of course, I have plenty of excellent loan officers I can refer you to should you need one. So, when you're talking to the bank, ask them, what is my total cash to close, and do you issue pre-qualifications or pre-approvals? Or, of course, call me and I'll walk you through. How do sale contingencies work? You want a new house, but you have to sell yours first. Or you're trying to sell your house and you find someone that wants to buy it, but they have to sell theirs first. Both buyer and seller agree to an amount of time to get it done, usually about 30 days. Sounds simple enough, right? This is called a sale contingent offer, and we used to see them all the time. Then between 2019 and 2024, they were virtually non-existent, and now we're starting to see them come back. I'm actually surprised it took that long because so many people use the equity in their current house as their cash to close for their next house. So what else do you need to know about them? As a buyer, you need to know that the seller is likely to keep marketing the property after they've accepted your sale contingent offer. And in the event that they find an acceptable non-contingent offer, there's going to be a predetermined amount of time that they can give you to clear your contingency, usually like 3 days. And if you don't, then they can move on with that sale or the non-sale contingent offer. This means if a seller accepts your sale contingent offer, this is not the time to start celebrating. Hypothetically, you need to get your house listed if it hasn't been already, let showings happen, accept an offer, get through returning approval and inspections, and get a deposit check from the buyer of your current house before that contingency is cleared. And at any point, the seller can call you up and say, we got a non-contingent offer and you have 3 days to do all of that, which can be challenging. And as a seller, if you accept a sale contingent offer, you need to know that in order to issue that 3-day notice, it's wise of you to work through the inspection and returning approval and get their deposit, also known as making damn sure that the new buyer isn't actually going anywhere once you go through with it, before you issue the notice to the first buyer. Sometimes that new buyer wants to find a house so bad that they're willing to move very fast or even waive that inspection, but if they aren't, odds are they don't want to pay for the inspection and jump through those hoops before they know for sure that the first buyer is out of the picture. It's a very classic one in the hand versus two in the bush scenario, and I've seen it play out every way that you can imagine. My best simple advice for you is that sale contingent offers are more prevalent than they have been in the last few years, and you definitely want an agent you can trust on your side to walk you through it all, whether you're buying or selling. When we make an offer, how long does the seller have to respond to our offer? This one I get all the time, and the short answer is, again, the seller can do whatever they want. We have a little bit of control over that by way of setting what's called an offer expiration, meaning we're making this offer, it's valid for 2 days, and after that, assume that we're walking away. And the reason we do that is because in a perfect world, we don't want the seller to receive our offer and then start shopping around with a bunch of other potential buyers, ultimately driving that price up. I've had plenty of scenarios where we make an offer on a house and the seller just goes completely dark on us. They don't respond for quite some time, or they come back with some unreasonable counteroffer, and that can be challenging, but when we make an offer, if we want to leverage them into doing something, the only real recourse that we have is just to pull the offer. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The best short advice I can give you is when you're a willing, ready, and able buyer, if you raise your hand and say, I will buy this house for this much money, if they start playing games, that's going to tell you a lot about what kind of person you're trying to do a deal with. And there is a lot of intangibles about that, and this is a good example of them. So just expect that you're along for the ride when you make an offer, and your patience with it is ultimately what decides. But I will say that most sellers respond in a reasonable amount of time. Plenty of them will say, we're going to take 24 hours to think about it after we receive an offer, and they'll put that right in the listing before we even make that offer. As long as you're comfortable with that, that's fine. And generally, as long as it's not like a 7 p.m. offer deadline or something like that, you can expect them to get back to you same day. When we're getting ready to sell a house, what improvements can be done that I can get the best bang for my buck? This is yet another situation where every situation is different. And the quick answer is curb appeal is very important, and I want to take it kind of a step farther than that. My go-to answer is that if we put $300 worth of mulch in the flower beds in front of the house, which looks great for the photos, and that's ultimately going to net you $3,000 more for your house, you're going to want to do that. If we're talking about remodeling a bathroom for $15,000 and there's a chance that you only get $10,000 more for that, or there's a chance you only get $20,000 more for that, that's a gamble. But there's a fine line between doing improvements to make it sale ready and flipping your own house. And unless you know with certain, like if you can do all the work yourself for cheap and everything, the whole bathroom's clearly not in very good shape, sometimes that can work out. But taking it a step farther than curb appeal, this is a little bit of a weird one, but I think that whatever door the lockbox is going to be hanging on should be in as good a shape as possible. And the reason for that is because it's the first impression. I mean, the first real impression is going to be the photos of the house online, but by the time they get there, and let's just assume it's the front door for this conversation. By the time they show up to the showing and they get to the front door and the agent opens the lockbox for them, if the key doesn't function the right way, or the door's sticky, or it's not in very good shape, it makes an impression and sets the tone for the rest of the house. And I've seen this work both ways. I've seen not so great houses, but when they open that door to go in for the first time, that sets the standard that someone is taking care of this house, and there may be some things that it needs, but there's some things that it doesn't need, and it also helps for the curb appeal and the photo and the whole thing. So if someone says, I know I'm going to put a couple $1,000s in the house to kind of spruce it up, if the door's not in very good shape, that's the first thing I always point to. The mulch, the flower beds, the lawn, make sure that's all taken care of. But having that door makes a giant impact, and I don't think people even realize it. What about buying a vacant piece of land and slowly building a house on it? This is a popular question, and seemingly very popular lately. I get like 2 or 3 phone calls a week about this one. There's a lot to go over here, so I'm going to try to simplify it. But in theory, when someone thinks about buying a house, odds are they're thinking about contacting a builder, putting the house on a parcel that builder already has, you pick out your options, you pick out the colors, et cetera, and 6 to 9 months from now, you have a brand new house to move into. And everyone knows that that's very expensive. And like you see these starting prices of like $550, and that's before you get any sort of upgrade. I'm talking window screens and storm door, and like you got a slider door off the dining room. They just do like 2 steps off the back of the house. You don't get a deck or anything like that. Building a house is crazy expensive, and if you know you're going to be there for a long time and you want something very specific, or it's very important to you that it's brand new, go for it, as long as you can afford it. What I hear when I'm asked that question is, I want to build my own thing in an area that I want, so I'm gonna go buy the vacant piece of land and then build the house myself. Sure. My first question is always, are you buying that land for cash, or are you getting a mortgage on it? And you might not have any problem finding someone with a different opinion than this, but if you're buying that piece of vacant land, do it for cash. When you get a mortgage on a vacant piece of land, there's not too many banks that do it. They certainly exist, and I can definitely hook you up with them. But the thing is, you're paying, like, if you're buying a $50,000 piece of land and you're putting 20% down, you're going to pay application fees and appraisal fees and et cetera, and then obviously you're going to be paying interest on whatever amount of money you're being loaned. And so you're taking that $50,000 piece of land and making it much more expensive. And when you talk about vacant land, the prices and value vary so greatly. Like, we care about things like, are the utilities on site, or are they at the street and we got to bring them in? Is it going to be a well and septic, or are they at the street? Is it a flood zone? Are you going to have a perk test done? Is it a wetland? There's all kinds of things that go into that. And it kind of seems to me like people just kind of pick a price. And I've seen vacant lands, much like houses, get very competitive and sell for quite a bit of money. I've seen things with crazy asking prices that sit on the market for 2 years and then eventually never end up selling. But if you're going this route, buy the vacant land for cash, which then leads to building the house. Now, the people that make out best in a situation like this are people that can what's called GC, or be the general contractor for the build. People come to me all the time and they say, I'm going to buy the vacant piece of land for cash, and then I'm going to go get a construction loan. Here's the thing with a construction loan. A couple things. One, they usually want a pretty good chunk of money down. So if you're trying to do this on a budget, putting 20% down on a $500,000 construction loan is going to be very expensive. And the other thing with a construction loan is you need a general contractor to oversee the whole thing that works with construction loans. They do draw accounts and stuff like that. You never actually receive the money as the buyer of the house. It stays with the bank and the contractor draws off of it. And this general contractor cannot be related to you. It has to be what's called arm's length, meaning like if your dad is a general contractor, he can't be the GC for the construction loan. If your dad's friend is a general contractor and the bank is somehow going to be able to prove that they're within an arm's length of you, they can't do it. So most people aren't, if you're getting a construction loan, you're not saving any money by doing it that way. What I see is people that are in the construction field themselves, and they have some cash saved up, and they do it piece by piece over time. So they get the vacant land, do the site work, pour the foundation. Some time goes by, then they do the stick build. They put the wood up to kind of frame the whole house up. Then they start doing the roof and the siding, and this happens on varying timelines, but this is how you make it happen. I realize it's not easy to save up, call it $300,000 to do all of this, but when you're done, you have a complete thing. You can just go to the bank. It's effectively like a refinance, but you then recuperate all those costs, and it's probably worth more money than what you have into it. So if you have the ability both to pay for and GC the thing yourself, this is a great way to go about it. If you think that by buying a piece of land and getting a construction loan and slowly building this house is going to put you in a better position than if you just contacted a builder, it's extremely unlikely. And in this same breath, when people talk about buying a vacant piece of land and building something on it, barndominium comes up all the time, which barndominium is a fancy term for basically building a pole barn and turning it into a living space. Now, nationally, I see this all the time. And I see some pretty cool builds. Like, you can do, I'm a car guy, I get it. I want a big garage with a small living space in it, and that's like a dream. Here's some problems with barndominiums. A, you're almost always building that on a concrete slab, so you don't have the basement. So you don't have that storage space. All your mechanics are going to be up on the first floor or somewhere above grade. The elements, especially here in Western New York, where it gets very cold sometimes, makes a big difference. So like if you're just putting a piece of concrete on the ground and building a barndominium above it, the ground underneath it stays cold and you're going to feel that. And you can get the heated concrete and the whole thing, that's expensive. But I find that you're, again, unless you're doing it completely yourself, you're not getting a ton of value compared to buying a regular house. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. But where you will probably start to care about it is when you go to sell it. A, there's a smaller buyer pool for something like that. And B, it's going to be very hard to appraise. So unless you're specifically looking for a cash buyer, or there happen to be a bunch of barndominiums around you that banks are going to be able to use as comps that they're going to be able to finance off of, sure. But like if you build a 3,000 square foot barndominium, it's not going to be very easy to directly compare it to the 3,000 square foot traditional house when it comes time for that mortgage break. So in short, if you're either have construction experience and resources, or you have a very high budget, you don't really care what the project is going to end up costing versus similar things around it, go for it. You will have no problem finding somebody with a different opinion on this, but I am mostly anti barndominium / buy vacant land, eventually get a construction loan, build a house. If we make a bid on a house and lose, will they tell us what the winning offer was? If we find ourselves in a competitive situation and we make an offer and we don't get the house, a different offer is chosen, it naturally leaves us very curious. What did the house sell for? Was it price? Was it terms? What's going on here? And you would think if we asked them, they would just tell us, but that's often not the case. And that can be very frustrating. Now, why they wouldn't tell us, I've heard the two big reasons I hear are we want to protect our negotiating power in the event this deal falls apart, and it's against the rules for us to disclose offer details for someone else's offer. People are going to do what they're going to do, and I can sort of see, like, if it's competitive and they accept an offer and that deal falls apart, they might not want us to know too much about what the other offer was, in the hopes that we will just come forth with our best terms regardless of what the offer was. Sure. But some of the time I see that deal will fall apart and that agent will call us up and say, the other offer was $250. Will you match the $250? Well, the rule of they can't disclose what the other offer was went right out the window, now didn't it? And they're not protecting any of their negotiating power. They're actually bolstering their negotiating power by saying what the other offer was. So as I'm starting to think about this video and writing it down, I called a fellow agent of mine, Ryan, hi Ryan, and we talked about it, and we agreed that we don't actually think there is that rule. We think that's a cop-out answer, and they're not protecting any negotiating power of theirs if that's the case. Sometimes the listing agent will be nice enough to say, hey, we got 12 offers and 9 of them were over asking price and 3 of them had home inspections and 1 of them was cash. Now, that doesn't tell us anything about what the winning offer was, but that gives us a whole lot more context than, sorry, we went with a different offer. So why then would some agents give us that context and other agents just clam right up on us? Good question. Definitely, the old school way of doing things was to not share anything you didn't have to. The seller and the listing agent, not sharing anything. And I'm sure that there are plenty of agents running around that are just set in their ways of doing things, and that's what they do. And ultimately, we can't make them tell us anything. Now, I would make the argument that, so a real estate agent has what's called a fiduciary duty to the client. So hypothetically, we bid $240 on a house and we don't get it. And the seller and the listing agent don't tell us anything about the offer that was accepted. And we're like, you know what? We were feeling one way, but now we lost and we still really want this house. So why don't we throw an even bigger number at them to see if we can get it? Now, regardless of offer deadlines or where they're at in the process, they could be 2 weeks out from closing. The letter of the law, not law, but like the rules of being in real estate, say that whenever an offer is presented by a buyer, it has to be presented to the seller, regardless of where they're at the process. And so if we go back to them and say, hey, we'll give you $260 for it, they have to hear that. Now, Where that gets complicated is A, how do we know for sure that that offer is actually going to be presented? There's a couple ways to do that. Call me if you have that question. B, if the seller does accept an offer and they're outside of attorney approval and there's no real way for them to get out of it, they can just straight up not close. But the problem with that is once the contracts are signed and the contingencies are worked through, the original buyer could technically sue the seller for breach of contract. I'm not an attorney, I'm not giving you legal advice, but that is one reason that the seller is hesitant, even if they get a better offer from us after the fact, to not go with that. To go with our offer now that they've accepted one. I do think that the world is shifting more toward providing that context because like we've talked about in the past, between accepted offer and actual closing, it takes about 2 months usually to close. So if we lose this offer and then a very similar house pops up and we know we bid 240 and we know we're probably going to have to beat that, it would be very helpful for us to know that what that house actually sold for, so we can base our new offer on this new house based on that. But unless they tell us that and we trust them, we have to wait for that 2 months to go by, the property to close. It all becomes public record at that point. But if the next similar house pops up well before that 2 months goes by, we're not going to know, because when they mark those things pending on Zillow and the MLS and all that fun stuff, it's still usually just the asking price. So there's a chance I post this on social media. And if I do, there's going to be all kinds of real estate agents with all kinds of opinions on this. And I'll be the first to tell you that I usually provide that kind of context. And back to the fiduciary duty point, I would make the argument that if several offers come in and the highest offer looks like the winner, the fiduciary duty of the agent would be to call the other offers and say, hey, this is what we're working with. Nothing's official yet, but do you want to try to get up to this number or beat it? Now, that gets a little dicey because that's not necessarily fair to the buyer that made the highest offer at that time. But I had this conversation once with my good friend Eric Vallone, who's an attorney, and it really stuck with me. Real estate is not fair. It's fair to the extent that the fairness is regulated, like the protected classes and fair housing rules and what have you. Like you can't discriminate against people or anything like that. But when it comes to who wants to pay the most money, how we arrive at that point doesn't necessarily have to be fair. It has to be in the best interest of the seller client fulfilling the fiduciary duty of the agent, the listing agent. So this is a complicated answer. And the short answer is they don't have to tell us anything if they don't want to. By not doing that, they might be leaving a bunch of money on the table, but we as the buyer don't ultimately care because we don't want to have to pay more than we have to. But knowing what the top offer is and given the opportunity to increase our offer if we need to or want to is always helpful. So I'm not making any accusations of specific real estate agents not fulfilling their fiduciary duty. Negotiation is tough. There's often factors that we'll never know about for both sides. Like there's going to be factors that the seller doesn't know about us as the buyer, and we as the buyer aren't going to know about the seller. Like we talked about earlier, we're often not going to get a second shot at it. If we do, think seriously about it. And once again, work with a real estate agent that you trust, that you know has a good reputation within the industry, and will get you the best shot at getting the house that you want. So we've talked about a lot here today and pretty quickly, and hopefully it was helpful. There's a lot more to everything that we talked about today. And regardless of where you're at in the process, I would love to be of help. If you don't need my help, feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you along, and I'll see you in the next one.